turn to the issue of sports capital grants. The pandemic obviously had a significant impact on it, and I know there was an underspend in 2 years. Has the department considered how that will be addressed, given that the ability to fundraise has also been limited and may impact future years? And I apologise if the question has been asked already. I was in the Dáil chamber.
That's okay, Deputy. I might get Cian to come directly in on this. Keep my colleague Cian O'Lynn on.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine, and thanks, Deputy. The question has been asked, but the very quick answer is because of the cyclical nature of how sports grants are awarded and then applied for and drawn down, it is by definition a very cyclical process. No clubs will suffer because of underspend. What we're doing at the moment in terms of the current round of sports capital grants, we are hoping to announce them in early January. Bear in mind, about half of all applicants have already received, for instance, an equipment grant that was announced in August. What we're trying to do is to maximise the available pot for January by getting as many old grant applications that are on the system to draw down this year, thereby maximising the pot for next year. So that's the very quick snapshot of where things are. But no applicants will suffer. We're well used to this process.
Yeah, Cian, has consideration ever been given to having a rolling sports capital application process? Because one of the difficulties is, and I dealt with many clubs this year, as in previous years, where perhaps their planning or their particular fundraising targets might not be reached within the window of the application process or thereafter. And you know, I've often considered perhaps a rolling application process might actually be far more agile.
Effectively, with sports capital being announced over the last number of years, at least every 2 years, there is quite a rolling element to it. From our experience of engaging with clubs, that pattern seems to work pretty well for them. We obviously would never say no if there was an increased fund that would allow that model, but at the moment the model does seem to suit the needs of clubs on the ground, as long as there aren't long gaps between rounds of sports capital funding, and that's obviously a priority for us to make sure that we can do it at a relatively regular frequency.
I think that frequency is absolutely important, Cian. You make a really important point that in the absence of it being regular, it is a major flaw in the system that it only happens on a not on a rolling basis. Chair, I'm not sure if I have time for one more question.
You've 1.5 minutes left.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So on that issue of the support that clubs received during the pandemic, from my experience, sports clubs were divided into two groups. Those that perhaps had a large borrowing connected with a clubhouse, or perhaps a clubhouse and a restaurant/bar type operation, and those that didn't. And while funding was provided, and you outlined it to Deputy Dillon, to national bodies, clubs on the ground really struggled, particularly those that had large borrowing requirements. And financial institutions were not always amenable to working with those clubs. And I just wonder what audits have you done? I know it doesn't fall entirely into the period that we're discussing, but what audits have you done in regards to how much money got out onto the ground and made an impact in individual clubs as well as in the sporting bodies, which obviously have a need too?
Thanks, Deputy. I suppose there are two aspects to that question. One, at the corporate governance level, there is a rolling programme of audits which are done by Sport Ireland of the NGBs. In terms of the impact of sports capital on the ground, this is something we do keep under review. So, for instance, if you look at our large-scale sports infrastructure fund, which is targeting much bigger projects, we are just now coming to the end of a review process of that initial round. And one of the emerging learnings is that there is a gap there in that the last 20 months has been really hard on those NGVs and local authorities who applied. Sports revenue has dried up costs of construction have gone up. So without prejudging the outcomes of the review, I think this is definitely something we're going to have to learn and look at as we review the LSSIF. And a lot of the same lessons would probably apply on the sports capitals on the side as well, which obviously applies to smaller amounts.
Thank you.
Yes.
Your Deputy, your time is up.
Thank you, Chair.
Maybe